So the next step is to actually sketch our curve, but I do think it's helpful if we go ahead and make an XY table, and the thing that we need to think about is what's the pattern for sine and cosine. So for sine it's 0, 1, 0, negative 1, and for cosine it's 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1. All right, so I'm just going to draw a little XY axis here. Sine x plus pi over 6. All right, and so remember our pattern, 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. I always do 5 points because those are the 5 that we found, and these are the x values that go with those y values. So negative pi over 6, pi over 3, 5 pi over 6, 4 pi over 3, and 11 pi over 6. All right, so I do want to put those x values on our x-axis. So that is our 30-degree angle, so we're just shifting it negative pi over 6. So this is our negative pi over 6. All right, and so you can see the pattern. It's going to be this much to the left of our normal value. So here is where our pi over 3 will be. Here is where our 5 pi over 6 will be. And then our 4 pi over 3. And then 11 pi over 6. All right, and then we just have to do our 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. There we go. All right, and then I'll go on and go on. I'll usually only make you graph just one period. All right, so this is the graph of our function. All right, let's do another one. All right, so this one's a little more complicated. This time we're using cosine. So let's remember all of our graphs are going to look like A, cosine bx plus c. All right, let's talk about how this graph, 3 cosine 2x plus pi over 2, is different from the graph of y equals cosine of x. Well, this 3 here means we're going to stretch vertically. So it stretches 3 units vertically. All right, what's next? Let's look at this pi over 2. That means we're going to shift pi over 2 units to the left. And then this 2 multiplied by x. So remember how things work with x values. It's always the opposite. So we're going to compress horizontally by 2. Which means that we're multiplying by 1/2. Or dividing by 2. So many ways to say this. Okay, so that's what we expect to happen. So let's go ahead and go through the process, find all the pieces, and then graph our function. All right, so let's determine the period, amplitude, and phase shift. So it's helpful if we know A, B, and C. So I'm going to write those down first. A is 3, B is 2, C is pi over 2. All right, and we can figure out our period. We have a formula for that. 2 pi over the absolute value of b. This time we actually have a b here. All right, so what does this tell us? This tells us that we're actually going to start repeating after pi units instead of 2 pi units. And so that should make sense because we're compressing horizontally by 2. So our period is going to be half the length that it normally is. So it's not going to be 2 pi, it's going to be pi. All right, Amplitude tells us how tall we are from the middle. All right, that's always just the absolute value of our A value. So that is 3. Okay, and then let's see. We need our phase shift. Okay, negative C over B. All right, so our C, so negative, our C is pi over 2. Our B is 2. So negative pi over 4 is our phase shift. All right, so what's nice about the phase shift, it actually tells us how much we're shifting instead of, it takes into account this division by 2 as well as the shifting to the left. So we're moving to the left pi over 4 units. All right, so we have all of our pieces. Let's go ahead and look at an interval that contains one cycle or one period of our graph. Okay, so again, with cosine, our period is usually between 0 and 2 pi. So let's write that down. Usually all of our x values go from 0 to 2 pi before they start repeating again. All right, let's see what's going to happen with this one. Instead of x inside of our function, we actually have 2x plus pi over 2. All right, so that's what we're going to put here in the x position. So it's actually 2x plus pi over 2. That's between 0 and 2 pi. And now we solve for x to figure out our interval. So first I'm going to subtract pi over 2 from everything. Okay, and so over here I get a negative pi over 2, 2x, and 3 pi over 2. All right, again, we're trying to solve for x in the middle. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. So we'll have our negative pi over 4 x and 3 pi over 4. So this is our new interval. That's the interval of one cycle or one period. So before it starts to repeat again. Okay. All right, so now all we need is our key points, and I kind of ran out of space on the sides. I'm going to do it below my graph. All right, so remember to get our 5 key points, we need to use our new period and divide it by 4. That's how we get our 5 pieces. All right, so what's our period? Well, we found it up here. Our period is pi, that's how long it takes to repeat, and we're going to divide it by 4. All right, so pi divided by 4. That's going to be the distance between each one of our x values. So to get our key points, first x value is always the first x value in our interval, negative pi over 4. The second one, negative pi over 4 plus the thing we're adding. So that's going to give us 0. Third x value, that would be 0 plus pi over 4. Fourth x value, pi over 4 plus pi over 4, which is pi over 2. And then the final and last value is pi over 2 plus pi over 4, which should hopefully be the last, I hope you guys can see that, it's kind of small. Should be the very last number in our interval, 3 pi over 4. All right, so I don't want this video to be too long, so we'll actually graph this in the next video.